Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tony Monaco, president of Tufts University. I'm pleased to welcome you today to a conversation with renowned conservationist, Dr. Jane Goodall, and honored to welcome Dr. Goodall, albeit virtually, to the Tufts campus. Let me begin by thanking the Jonathan M. Tisch College of Civic Life for hosting today's event. Thanks also to the Environmental Studies program, the Fletcher School Center for International Environment and Resource Policy, and the Cummings School of Veterinary Medicine for their co-sponsorship. It's always great when so many different parts of our university come together to support conversations about issues that touch on multiple disciplines and that ultimately affect us all. Throughout this year, Tisch College has hosted conversations with extraordinary leaders in politics, activism, and media who have spoken about some of the most pressing problems in our society. Sometimes it's easy to forget that those problems do not just affect us as human beings, they also affect all the living things which share our planet. And in many ways, it's fitting to host this conversation as we near the end of another academic year shaped by the COVID-19 pandemic, which is a reminder of what can happen when our interactions with the animal kingdom can result in unintended consequences. I'm exceedingly proud that at Tufts University's Cummings School of Veterinary Medicine, we have some of the world's leading scholars and practitioners who work tirelessly on these issues, and I'm glad that two of them will join us in a few moments to lead the conversation with Dr. Goodall. Jane Goodall probably needs no introduction, but she deserves at least a brief one. Dr. Goodall is a renowned conservationist whose work has redefined the relationship between humans and animals. In 1960, she began her landmark study of chimpanzee behavior in what is now Tanzania. Her work at Gombe Stream would become the foundation of future primatological research. In 1977, Dr. Goodall established the Jane Goodall Institute, which continues the Gombe research and is a global leader in the effort to protect chimpanzees and their habitats. The Institute is also widely recognized for innovative community-centered conservation and development programs in Africa. Dr. Goodall also founded Roots and Shoots with a group of Tanzanian students in 1991. Today, that program connects hundreds of thousands of youth in more than 120 countries who take action to make the world a better place for people, animals, and the environment. Dr. Goodall has received numerous honors, including the French Legion of Honor, the Medal of Tanzania, Japan's prestigious Kyoto Prize. In 2002, she was appointed to serve as a United Nations Messenger of Peace, and in 2003, she was named a Dame of the British Empire. Leading today's conversation with Dr. Goodall are two professors at the Cummings School, Felicia Nutter and her husband, Chris Whittier, both of whom have helped continue the legacy of Dr. Goodall's work at Gombe Stream. Dr. Felicia Nutter is the Director of International Veterinary Medicine at Cummings. She has a long resume of hands-on field work and leadership from East Africa to Southeast Asia and from California to New England. When she was a veterinary student, she worked on a research project in Gombe Stream and later continued that research through a Fulbright fellowship. She returned to Central and East Africa to serve as the regional field veterinarian at the Mountain Gorilla Veterinary Project. Felicia is now a part of the One Health Workforce Project, tasked with creating more effective cooperation between veterinarians, doctors, and public health officials to better prevent and respond to outbreaks of infectious diseases. Dr. Chris Whittier is the director of the Masters in Conservation Medicine program at the Cummings School, and he is actively involved in global research and conservation efforts. Also a Cummings School alumnus, Chris worked with Dr. Goodall in Tanzania as a veterinary student and went on to earn degrees in population medicine with a focus on the diagnosis and epidemiology of infectious disease in wild gorillas. Like Felicia, Chris also served as a regional field veterinarian with the Mountain Gorilla Veterinary Project in Africa and was a contributor to the USAID's PREDICT epidemiologic research program. Before I turn it over to Chris and Felicia to lead the conversation, I want to make a special announcement. This is the last Tisch College Distinguished Speaker Series event of the year, and in a way, the last Distinguished Speaker Series event ever. That's because starting next year, the series will be renamed in honor of retiring Tisch College Dean Alan Solomont and his wife, Susan Lewis Solomont. Over the past 7 years, Dean Solomont has helped build the speaker series into a forum for renowned figures like Elizabeth Warren, John Kerry, the late John Lewis, and this semester alone, Stacey Abrams, Michael Steele, Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Chris Wallace, and Dr. Anthony Fauci. Now, thanks to a generous gift from the Solomonts, the Susan and Alan Solomont Distinguished Speaker Series at Tisch College will continue this proud legacy of bringing to campus civic leaders who inform, challenge, and inspire all of us to build a better world. I want to thank Alan for his commitment to the Speaker Series and to Tisch College, and for his decades of dedicated leadership to our university. I also want to ask him and Susan to say a few words before we kick off today's conversation.
Okay, I need a little help to unmute there, but I got it. Thank you, Tony. Thank you for your leadership of the university and for all your support for Tisch College and for me as dean over these last 7 years. Susan and I are especially proud to have our name associated with the Tisch College Speaker Series. In the first place, Tufts is a very important institution to both of us and our family. In addition to my undergraduate degree 51 years ago, Susan has a master's degree from Elliott Pearson, and our daughter is a graduate. And several members of our family are also attended Tufts. In fact, at last count, over a dozen family members have Tufts degrees. And as I approached my retirement from the dean's job, and I thought about what I might leave behind, what made the most sense was to help ensure that the speaker series would continue to enhance the civic life of the entire university. I can't speak about the success of the speaker series without thanking all of my colleagues at Tisch College, and especially the indomitable Jess Burns and Shanley Daly. So thanks for letting us put our name on something that we regard as so valuable and so special, and it will be a great excuse for me to return to campus in future years. And now it's my pleasure to turn it over to our moderators, and so we can hear from Dr. Jane Goodall. Thank you.
Welcome, everybody. I'm Felicia Nutter, and I think if Chris Whittier will unmute himself, then we'll be ready to go. There we go. Unmute. There we go. Okay. Thank you very much for the introductions. It's our privilege and our great pleasure to be able to spend this time with Jane. And she did say earlier that she preferred to be called Jane, so we will we will go with that. Although I would love to call you Dame, because I think that's a great award. Wonderful title. I won't do that. And I'm going to pass the mic to Chris to start us off on the questions.
Hello, Jane. It's very nice and a pleasure for us to reconnect. And we wanted to start off by talking a little bit about your connection to Tufts. And so we tend to think of you having a very long connection to Tufts, starting with our former beloved dean, Dean Lowe, and as well as your connection with Dale Peterson, who has been your collaborator and your biographer. So we were hoping that you could start off by saying a little bit about your personal connection to them and how that relates to Tufts, because obviously it's those connections that then kind of translated to inspiration to a lot of faculty and students, including Felicia and myself, who probably would not be here together if not for the original inspiration of you.
Well, I remember so fondly my relationship with Frank Lowe. I mean, we got on so well. We had so many amazing discussions. But now you've brought this on yourself by asking this question. The last time I was at Tufts was to address the graduating veterinary students. I don't remember which year. And as I'm sure you know, the graduation ceremony is out of doors. And it was a very, very hot, hot day. And the faculty and the speaker were sitting in the sun and the students were in the shade because they reckoned that's the way it should be. They were the ones who were being congratulated for their hard work. So Frank Lowe said to me, he said, Jane, it is so hot. I suggest you put this heavy gown on. I think they were giving me an honorary degree or something. Take your clothes off because, it's so hot. So I took my clothes off and put on the gown, but then there was a real rush to get to the next engagement. I almost couldn't do Tufts. It was fitted in at the last moment, and they'd actually sent a helicopter. And so somebody said to me, you have to give us your robe. And I said, well, I can't because I'll be naked. That's my vivid memory of my last visit to Tufts. But no, I remember going around and seeing the veterinary work and having a great relationship with him. And with Dale Peterson, well, he just was my biographer, yeah. But the reason I don't like being called Dame, Felicia, is because I think of a dame as a man dressed as a woman in a pantomime.
Oh.
Also to be whatever it is, Dame Commander of the British Empire. There ain't no empire anymore. It's gone. So it's a kind of a very strange title.
I think it has a different connotation in American English. So we'll just, we can leave it at that. Well, I'd like to follow up with a question about related to the work that Tisch College does, since they're sponsoring or co-sponsoring this talk. So, we've heard about how they do unique work to really empower young people with tools and resources and education to engage in their communities and to have a really rich civic life and to be agents of positive change. So it was mentioned that you started Roots and Shoots in 1991 in Tanzania with a group of students. And I had the tremendous privilege. I remember I was in Tanzania at the time and working at Gombe for a summer student project. And I remember the discussions about Roots and Shoots and the passion that you had for it. And I still remember the descriptions about roots, burying underground, and shoots can break through concrete and are so powerful. And the children are that for the future. And it's amazing to see what has happened, how Roots and Shoots has grown from just this single start in Tanzania to the hundreds of thousands of students and young people engaged. And I wonder if you could talk a bit more about that, just some of the things that they've done or how that took off.
I would love to, because it is, we've messed up the world. And the reason that Roots and Shoots began is because so many students told me they'd lost hope, that we'd compromised their future. Well, in fact, we've stolen it, haven't we? There's a Native American saying that we haven't inherited this planet from our ancestors. We borrowed it from our children. But when you borrow, you pay back. And we've just been stealing. And so when the young people said, you've compromised our future and there's nothing we can do about it, we have compromised their future, but it's not too late to start healing some of the harm, the terrible harm that we've inflicted on this planet, and at least try to slow down climate change and loss of biodiversity. because the world's in a right mess right now. And so the idea was, if you actually tackle a project that you care about right where you are, maybe it's cleaning a stream, maybe it's picking up litter, maybe it's helping out in an animal shelter or a soup kitchen or whatever, then you get a feeling of, well, I've really done something. And then when you think there's other young people doing the same thing around the world, you know, this saying, think globally, act locally, turn it around, act locally, and then you have the courage to think globally. Otherwise, if you only think globally to start with, you won't have the energy to act, because it's awful what's happened. So Roots and Shoots now has members from preschool, not so many, lots and lots of kindergarten, very strong in university. I really count on university groups and young people who are in their first jobs. We've actually started it in prisons and with old people too, retired people. So it's, and some of the staff of big corporations are joining Roots and Shoots and getting all their children involved. And it's not just that they're doing projects to help people, animals, and environment, projects they choose, by the way, but they're also, as we try to bring them together, mostly virtually, but physically on some occasions, they're just finding out for themselves that far more important than the color of your skin, your language, your nationality, your religion, your culture, is the fact that we're all human beings. We bleed in the same way when we're hurt. We cry the same tears. We laugh when we're happy. And that's just emerging from the program. So I'm very excited about it, trying to develop it more and more all the time. There was a group in Tufts, but it's not active anymore, is it?
I'm actually not sure. That's a great question. And I think we have a lot of Tufts students on the call today on the webinar. So perhaps if they would like to reinvigorate Roots and Shoots, this would be
yes, I wish they would. I mean, all you have to do is sit down with some friends and work out things you'd like to do to help people, animals, and environment. And we'd like you to register with us. Doesn't cost anything, simply because then we can share what you do and link you with others doing the same. And it's a network now, it's a family. We call it a family around the world. And I've been told by several students when I came to one of your gatherings, that's the only time I haven't felt discriminated against.
Mm-hmm. I think it's really, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think on that note, I mean, I think that's a very, I think, important point. And I would just sort of verify that, I think it was probably maybe 2 years after you founded Roots and Shoots. I think the first time that I was had the pleasure of spending some time with you, Jane, at Gombe, and I remember your enthusiasm, even a couple of years, and that you were so effusive about, and hopeful about that. And I think we're trying to, I think all of us, try to hold on to those ounces of hope and think that there might be, sort of a brighter future for all of us. I think related to that, I wanted to ask you a little bit about, I think the Gombe 60 event, I guess, was last year, sort of celebrating 60 years of, what you started at Gombe so many years ago, which is just an incredible undertaking. And I'm not sure that everyone appreciates that a big part of what you were able to do there was building the capacity of the local people to be able to have a say in the conservation and the research of the animals that they're, mostly interacting with. And I think of that as being really sort of a fundamental and a foundational thing that you established that has now become sort of imperative, and conservation related work. So I was wondering if you could say a little bit about the sort of evolution of the work at Gombe over those 60 years, and more importantly, a little bit about the importance of training the local people to be able to carry on and really perform that work.
Yeah, well, right from almost the beginning, we had a good relationship with the local people. At the start, the British, it was part of the crumbling British Empire back then. There was about 2 places left, I think. Anyway, so the authorities refused permission for me to go. They said she can't, but Leakey always persisted. So in the end, they said she can come, but she's got to have somebody with her. So the volunteer who came was my amazing mother. And she had a brother, my uncle, who was a doctor. So we came supplied with, very simple aspirins and Band-Aids and saline drips and things that people don't use anymore, like Epsom salts that were jolly good for tummies. And started a really good relationship with the local people that way. And then training the local people from the villages to come and get to know the chimps and follow them as individuals, which I always thought was such a mistake with Dian Fossey, that if she'd let the local people get to know the gorillas, they would have done what our people did, go into the village and say how wonderful they were. I'm sure of it. I argued with her a lot. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So, I confronted the professors at Cambridge who told me animals didn't have personalities, minds, or feelings, got my PhD, built up this little research station that you and Felicia both knew. And I was the best days of my life out in the rainforest, understanding the interconnection of all things. This I like to call it the tapestry of life. We now boringly call it biodiversity, which most people don't even understand. But anyway, 1986, we had the first Understanding Chimpanzees conference that I helped to organize in Chicago, because by then there were about 7 other field sites or 6 others, I can't remember now. At the beginning, it was just me. And we brought them together to talk about chimp behavior, but we had a session on conservation and conditions in, e.g. circuses, medical research. But seeing that right across Africa where chimps were studied, the forests were going, chimp numbers were dropping, the beginning of bushmeat, growth of human populations penetrating chimp habitat. Now we know about the disease, the risk of chimps being infected with human disease because biologically they're so like us. And so when I managed to get some money to go around Africa to learn about chimp problems, but I learned about the problems of people, the crippling poverty, the lack of good health and education, the degradation of the land, the desperation. And it came to a head when I flew over the tiny 35 square kilometer Gombe National Park. In 1960, it was part of the Great Equatorial Forest Belt. By the late 1980s, it was an isolated patch of forest surrounded by bare hills, all the trees gone, too many people for the land to support, struggling to survive, cutting down the trees, not because they didn't know there'd be erosion on the steep slopes, but because their own land was overused and infertile. And what could they do? Cut the trees down to make charcoal or make space to grow some food. And this is when it hit me. If we don't help these people to find ways of living without destroying the environment, we can't save chimps, forests, or anything else. So we began this program, Take Care, that we called Takari, and we began it with the people. It wasn't a bunch of arrogant white people marching into a poor village and saying, well, you've made a right mess of things, we're going to help you. No, it was a little group of local Tanzanians going into the villages, sitting down, how can we help? So that's how it started, with the support of the villagers. And gradually it became a very holistic program, including scholarships for girls, microfinance, so that people could start their own small environmentally sustainable businesses, family planning information, which was so eagerly received, because people want to educate their children. They can't educate 8 anymore. It's very expensive in Tanzania. So that program, which began in the 12 villages around Gombe, was given a whole new lease of life when we brought in Lillian Pintea, who brought in GIS, GPS satellite imagery, so that the villagers could make their land use management plans and put land aside to make a buffer around Gombe, and gradually putting more land aside to make corridors to link the isolated Gombe chimps with other remnant groups. And it's now in 104 villages throughout Chimp Range in Tanzania, and in 6 other countries where we work, JGI works, studying and protecting chimps. And honestly, conservation will never work long time unless the local people are involved. And all of these villagers are now our partners in conservation. We've given them the tools to monitor the health of their forests, and they understand protecting the environment is for their own future, not just for wildlife.
There's so much in that I would love to follow up and discuss more. We're limited in time, but one of the questions I had was about your not really conversion, but your transition, from a passionate observer of the natural world, which you share the anecdotes about watching the chicken lay an egg, or taking the worms to bed, and a lot of people know those, and that translated to becoming just an excellent observer of the natural world and a passionate advocate for what you saw. Like you said, you fought with your PhD committee, for what you thought was fate.
I didn't fight them. I just went on very calmly saying what I thought was true. And luckily, Robert Hind came to Gombe, and afterwards he wrote to me and he said, in 2 weeks, I've learned more about animal behavior than the rest of my life. And then he helped me to put my very outrageous ideas about personality, mind, and emotion right in such a way that other scientists couldn't tear me to pieces. So I owe him a lot.
Yeah. So you persisted.
I persisted, but I don't think attacking people is the way to change minds. You've got to change the heart and stories. Yeah. That's the way.
Exactly. So we've talked a bit about chimps. You've often shared the anecdote of being accused of liking chimpanzees more than people, and replying or explaining that, well, you certainly like some chimps more than some people. And
some people more than
some chimps. Exactly. So I think Chris and I, both spent time at Gombe when, with Frodo and some other chimps.
Frodo
were well known. So we wondered if you might expand just a bit on the mind, personality, and just share a bit more personal anecdotes about individual chimps. He was quite a chimp.
Yeah, I mean, there's so obviously a difference in personality, and Frodo's part of this famous F family, which, I first knew the old matriarch Flo, and her sons were Fabian and Figan, and her daughter was Fifi. And Figan went on to become alpha male, this very, very intelligent guy. And since then, there have been 5 other F family males. We're now into the 4th generation. And the great thing is that we can look back over the 60 years, and what I believe to be true is true, that if you have a supportive mother, key, like my mother was, support your child. Even if you get beaten up going to rescue the child, you go and rescue the child. And it turns out that the males are more assertive, they're more likely to rise to a high rank, they're more likely to have more offspring, and the females are better mothers. So that's, those are the kind of questions we can ask because of the long-term nature of the data, which, by the way, is all being digitalized, and it's in the University of Arizona now. That's where the database is. So many students are now using that data. And what I think is so important, there's a big risk in today's world that all observers start using just little clicks on some kind of gadget to make everything statistical. But if you don't record the stories, if you don't really get a feeling for the personality, and, why must we be told by scientists that anecdotes are not good? Because it's an anecdote, it's an observation, but it's made once. Does that mean it's not important? No, it's a way of seeing what an animal species is capable of. And it gives you all kinds of ideas. So for me, collecting anecdotes about all these different chimpanzees is absolutely fascinating, and it's led to some amazing insights. I was also told you mustn't have empathy with your subject. You've got to be coldly objective. Well, that's rubbish. I mean, if you have empathy, you get an understanding that you don't have if you just sit back and coldly observe. And it's not true that you can't make absolutely, careful scientific observations if you're emotionally involved, because you can.
Indeed. Chris.
I think Felicia stole my question. So I think where she was going, I think originally with the question that she was thinking about, and your sort of transition from observer and scientist to activist, and recognizing that you always wear many hats. We're curious, knowing how prior to the pandemic, how much traveling you were doing, and to be giving talks and trying to inspire people and give people hope and talk about things that we could all be doing for conservation and the tapestry of life. And we're curious that Felicia was pointing out that you used to refer to your natural habitat as being airports and waiting rooms. And so we're curious in light of the pandemic, and doing more of these kinds of things. And you said earlier that you've been, in England, for most of the duration of the pandemic, it sounds like. But I'm wondering if you feel that there are better opportunities, if you feel like you've been able to connect with more people by traveling less and being able to talk more. But I'm curious as to how you see, are there good things that might have come out of the sort of use of technology and webinars from the pandemic that might help you in sort of spreading your message?
Well, at first I was extremely frustrated and angry. I was actually in the car on the way to the airport to Brussels, and I was called back by my frantic sister, who said, no, the United Nations has closed down its building in Brussels, which is where I was giving a talk, so you can't go. And that was it. So I had been here the whole time. And having been frustrated, then I thought, well, that's not helping anybody. So I have a great team with the Jane Goodall Institute, both in UK and in US. And so we created Virtual Jane. And the other day, I learned that the outreach on social media now has risen from something just under 1 million to something closer to 9 million. And I've reached millions more people in many more countries. We've even managed to start new organizations during the pandemic in India, which is working superly, in Turkey, very passionate, and in Israel. So I've had the opportunity to join so many conferences, to talk to schools, to talk to universities, to send out video messages for this, that, and the other. And so but it's been absolutely exhausting. I've never worked as hard in my entire life, never. And it's bad for my eyes, it's bad for my voice. It's relentless. It's every single day, every day. Like this is the third event virtually today, and I've still got one long video to do, and then a phone call later tonight. So it's got a silver lining. It's helped spread the message without any question.
Yeah, there's always benefits and challenges. So I was thinking about it in terms of the travel and the, not as much jet lag and toll on your body from that way, and a decreased carbon footprint, because you're not in the airplanes going about. But
yeah, the technology uses more energy than people like to think.
Yeah. And
I never suffered from jet lag. I just have a good system that fight for it. Didn't worry about jet lag much. I adapted to it, I suppose.
Yeah. I
miss the people. I miss the contact with people. I really miss that. I've got friends all over the world, and getting together with them and, after a busy day, sitting down, having a little dinner and some red wine and some whiskey and talking and laughing. I miss that terribly.
Mm. I think we all share that feeling of missing our friends and looking forward to the time that we can reconnect with them in person. So you mentioned, sitting down with friends after a long day and relaxing and sharing a laugh. This might put you on the spot too much, and I know you'll tell me no if that's the answer. But some people know that you have a wicked sense of humor, and you're really good at telling jokes, and you often have a repertoire. So I don't know if you have a current favorite. I know it's different when you're trying to do it by Zoom, but if you have any current favorite jokes.
I have so many favorite jokes. I'll not tell a Trump joke, although I could. Do you want a slightly, well, it's not really risque. It's about a young man who was not completely normal, but he lived on a farm and he was lovely. And he was called Joe. And one of the pigs had a litter. He slept in a loft above the pigs. And the runt of the litter was going to be killed. So Joe said, oh, can I look after her? So she was called Betsy, and he looked after her, and she grew into a wonderful pig. Farmer down the road said, hey, you're Betsy, you should get some little piglets, Joe. You could get some money. And he said, how do I get piglets? Well, you bring her down the road and leave her with my boar all day. You'll get some piglets. So Joe got up very early and he smartened up Betsy and put a ribbon around her neck and sat her in the wheelbarrow, trundled her down the road, picked her up in the evening, got up even earlier, rushed down, no little piglets. So he tidied her up again and put another bow and left her all day, took her back in the evening. Now he's really excited. The next morning he gets up terribly early, it's still dark. He goes down with his flashlight. No little piglets, no Betsy. And there was Betsy sitting in the wheelbarrow.
See, good one.
I just happen to love pigs. They're so intelligent.
Wonderful. Yeah. Chris, your turn.
Yeah, that's going to be hard to follow.
I know.
I think so, Jane. We're often, Felicia and I are lucky in that we're at an institution that is predominantly with students that identify as female. As you probably know, is pretty common in the veterinary world now, and often. I think it's really inspiring to us to see the sort of transformation in sort of science and conservation. And I think, we all recognize the importance of women having the their proper role and place in all that. And I think you, as a sort of a pioneer, as a woman scientist, and some of the struggles that you faced early on, but also having appreciation for the importance of empowering local women, as you sort of spoke to earlier. I was wondering if you could say a little bit about just about your path and challenges, and what you would tell aspiring young women that want to have a career in conservation and science.
Well, to start with the last bit of the question, I would tell the young women today, you've got to be really passionate about it, because it's not always easy to get funding. So you've got to be really passionate, and then simply say what my mother said to me. You're going to have to work really hard, take advantage of every opportunity. And if you don't give up, you'll surely find a way. And sometimes the way isn't straight. You may not get exactly where you wanted first thing, but you can always, whatever you do in the meantime, you can have your eye on the goal. But so, and I also tell women, young girls, you've got to prove that you're equal to anybody, whether male or female. That's what you have to aim for, not trying to get a position because you're a woman. That's not the way to go. Not expecting to get special treatment because you're a woman, just working, showing you're good. But I was lucky, you see, I didn't face any of these problems. When I began, there was nobody out in the field. George Schaller did 1.5 years with mountain gorillas. The Japanese were working with macaques, but we didn't know at all about them. They were another world then. And then there were 2 Americans, DeVore and somebody Hall, working with chacma baboons in South America. That was it. And yes, they were all males, but Leakey chose me because I was a woman. He felt that women might be better observers, might be more patient, might be less concerned about getting on with it in order to get a PhD, in order to, marry and have a family like men were back then. They were expected to be the breadwinner. And the local Tanzanians, when I arrived, they were just about becoming independent. So apart from the first few months, Tanzania was independent of Britain. And the Tanzanian men were a little bit resentful of human white males, not surprisingly. But I was an innocent young girl, And, I was there with my mother. So they wanted to help. They were kind. They helped. So being a woman for me just turned out to be really lucky. But what I love now when it's about this, we've got a long way to go to get women equality, especially in some countries. But on the other hand, there's been huge progress since I was young. I mean, huge. Women in politics, women in law, women in everything, and especially in, animal behavior, I think. And but the story I love was a South American tribe, and I forget which country it was in, but the chief was telling me that he said, we feel our tribe is like an eagle, and one wing of the eagle is male and the other wing is female, and only when those wings are equal will the tribe fly high. I think that's beautiful.
Great, thank you for that. Well, the time has flown, as it often does, so I think we have time for probably one more question from Chris and I, and then we'll pass it over for questions and answers from the audience, the participants. I'm thinking back to what you said about the roots and shoots and turning that, think globally, act locally on its head, so that people understand that they can start wherever they are and they can maybe do the most where they are, start locally and then expand that to think globally. I think that's a wonderful way to help empower people and help them not feel so overwhelmed about all the challenges that are facing, our communities, our country, our world today. And also, you recognizing that Roots and Shoots is not just for children, anymore. It started as a children's organization, but now involves, young adults and even old people, because as long as you're alive, you're still able to grow and learn. So I think wrapped up in all of that, there are sometimes some bold proposals from conservationists and activists about what people can do. I mean, E.O. Wilson has set forth the half Earth proposition, that we try to set aside half of the Earth's surface for animals, and some other bold ones as well. And the things we need to do to meet the goals of the Paris Climate Treaty that we've now rejoined, thankfully. I wonder if you always give people hope, and so wondering if as a last thought, what you're thinking now about the hopeful things that people can do, continuing to act locally. Are there big proposals, big propositions that people should be aiming for, trying to get engaged with? What can we do? What can we do?
I think what people can do depends on who they are, where they are, what their situation is, what their passion is. Everybody can do something. The main message of Roots and Shoots is every individual makes an impact every day, and you get to choose what impact you make, unless you're really poor, in which case you just have to do what you do to survive. But I think what's really important is there's so much doom and gloom in the media, which is right, there is, but they're not giving enough time to the amazing things that are going on, the incredible projects I've seen, like No More Bare Hills around Gombe. And that's not just because, yes, we've done tree planting, but it's the seeds and sometimes the roots of trees in the ground. Give them a chance, nature can come back. And that's happening all around the world. There are these rewilding programs. There's one in the UK where we've got beavers coming back. And then a huge area in Europe, right, stretching over many countries. It's incredible, the programs they're doing and the animals that are coming back. Sometimes they haven't been there for 100 years. And, then there are all the individuals doing extraordinary things. So the reason I'm always telling people, there is hope is because if we believe there's no hope, if everybody starts believing there's no hope, if young people believe there's no hope, then we're finished, aren't we? Because if you don't think what you're doing is going to make a difference and help, why bother to do anything? Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. So giving young people hope, which comes from tackling projects and succeeding and meeting people who are tackling projects and succeeding, is something that I feel very, very passionate about. And I'm always pushing the media to put out more of the good news stories, and there's so many of them. There's a couple in China. One man became blind. The other man, when he was 3, lost both arms because he touched an electric wire. And somehow they got together, and between them, they planted something like 50,000 trees, and they just go around. They don't have much money. They beg, borrow, or steal cuttings, and the blind man holds onto the sleeve of the one without arms, and they help each other. I mean, these are the stories that inspire people. We need to be inspired by good. And so that's the kind of story I encourage the media to tell. And so giving people hope. Well, this is hope, at least for this individual. This is, can you see? I can't see, you see. Picasso. Picasso is a pig who was rescued from slaughter. And she absolutely loves painting. As soon as she sees the brush and the paint, she gets all excited. And her owner's an artist. She puts up this easel, and Picasso is just painting where you can Google Picasso and you'll see. And I love it. And it's helping people to stop eating pork, because all of our heavy meat eating is destroying the environment as well as being cruel. And so stories of animals, amazing animals doing amazing things, everything to give people a feeling there's so much left to learn. I'm sure you've seen My Octopus Teacher. Mm-hmm. Well, that's what a thing. There's so much to learn. This almost alien being with brains in her arms, as well as one in her head, making contact with this human who's learned to hold his breath for 6 minutes or more. It's incredible. Mm-hmm. So we need to share all those things and put together the good that's happening. Like at Gombe, to go back to the chimps where it all began, in the last 6 years, 6, 7, and 9 chimpanzees have come in along our corridors from outside and been accepted into the Kasakela community, and so are, improving their genetic, preventing too much inbreeding. And we've done surveys, and they've found there's quite a lot more chimps than we thought outside the park. And we've got our Takari villages there. So, there's so much that's hopeful. And young children need to know that. They're basically hopeful to start with, and we need to encourage that. Just very important to me.
Well, that's a wonderful segue. Go ahead, Chris.
Well, I was going to say, I think that's the perfect transition for our first question from the audience, who I think is coming in from Danica, who I think is a 3rd grader.
You want to introduce yourself? Yes. Hi, I'm Danica. I'm a 3rd grader from Holliston, and I have a question for Jane. Is David Greybeard still your favorite monkey? Chimp.
Yes, of all time, David Greybeard. Here he is. You can see him. Most handsome chimp I've ever known. The one who showed me tool using. Can you see him? Mm-hmm. Yes. And so David Greybeard is still, looking back, my favorite, along with old Flo. Flo was amazing. So the 2 of them, Flo and David Greybeard, of all time.
Yes.
Hi, Jane. Thank you so much for answering Danica's question. I'm Danica's sister, older sister. So in an interview with, I think it was Business Tricks, you said that it still surprises you that humans, the most intelligent creature to walk the planet, are destroying our home. So with that in mind, do you think it's time that we culturally challenge the notion that humans are the most intelligent creature if we are the reason, if we can't stop our what seems to be inevitable and self-inflicted downfall, especially with it keeping in mind that chimps, for example, which you have helped us discover, such an intelligent and emotional animal, have been around for so much longer.
Yeah, well, that's the reason I don't talk about the thing that separates us from other animals. Mm-hmm. Isn't that we're more intelligent, what I always say is we're more intellectual.
Okay.
See, so the intellect will design a rocket that goes up to Mars from which a little robot crawls and takes photographs. The intellect is what's enabling us to talk from different parts of the world. And we could actually be talking, if we wanted, to people all around the world. I did that this morning. So intellectually, we're smart, but it's not intelligent to destroy the planet. So what's gone wrong? I think there's some kind of disconnect between this very clever brain and the human heart, where we poetically seek love and compassion. I mean, love and compassion isn't in the human heart, but that's the way we think of it. And so we need to link those two back together to get wisdom and intelligence. And we have to stop thinking that we can have unlimited economic development if we carry on as we are now on a planet with finite natural resources. We've got to have a new relationship with nature, a new relationship with animals. Otherwise, the future of you two is not good. So we have to take action. And you can help. You've got to join Roots and Shoots, okay?
She's in 3rd grade. She's gonna see what are you gonna do at school?
I want to start a Roots and Shoots club thing.
We would highly encourage that. And I want to thank Danica and Anna for your question. And next questioner is Charlie.
Hi, Jane. It's such an honor to be asking you this question. So you've mentioned how important it is to study chimp personality in order to challenge the human hubris that only humans can have things like emotions and intelligence. And I'm wondering how you find the balance between studying chimp personality and anthropomorphizing them.
Well, anthropomorphizing, it means simply that you're attributing human characteristics to non-human animals. Well, the thing is that very often those characteristics are not just human, they're shared. And that's what chimps have helped to break down that barrier that said there was a difference in kind. So what's wrong is if you have a dog and you sort of get all soppy and my little dog loves this and loves being dressed up and all those things that aren't really true. But if you describe exactly the different personalities of different chimpanzees or dogs or whatever, because it was my dog, Rusty, who taught me that animals have personality long before I met the chimps. And so if you describe what they do, and then scientists tell you you're being anthropomorphic, you could turn it around and say, well, when we attribute these characteristics to people, we're being animalmorphic or something because they have those characteristics too. They never look at it from the two sides, only one side. And there was a big, every time I found chimps doing something they thought only people could do, like having a personality, like making tools, like having a culture, it caused an uproar because it was challenging our supreme separation from everything else, which is rubbish, isn't it? You know that, don't you?
Thank you. Thank you, Jane. We have a next question from Clara.
Hello, my name is Clara. I am going to be a biochem major at Tufts University, and it's such an honor to speak with you today, Jane. And my question is, what would you say is the most widely held misconception about your research?
Misconception about what?
About your research.
About my research. Well, there was a lot of misperception about it, but I think that's faded away now. I think most people think it was pretty good. You could argue we shouldn't have fed bananas to the chimps, which we wouldn't do now and we don't do anymore. But back then, people did put up feeding stations. And what I always say there, if we had not fed bananas and had the chimps come to camp, the Geographic was funding Hugo Van Lowick to take film. He couldn't have got the good film. That would have been the end of the whole study. There would be no chimps at Gombe at all, because if I'd gone, the people would immediately have taken the land back. They wanted it. They went as far as to come and cut down 200 trees when I was there all on my own to try and drive me away. So misperceptions that it's only people who want to do nasty things to animals who continue to say that it's wrong to ascribe personality and emotion. But if you're doing horrible things, if you're working in a factory farm, if you're doing very cruel tests to animals in research, then it's much more convenient to think that they don't have emotions, that they don't feel pain the way we do, isn't it?
Mm. Good. Thank you, Jane. I have another question from John.
I'm glad there's a male at last.
Yeah.
We're getting equal wings.
Thank you. It's so lovely to have you here. My name is John. I'm a junior studying anthropology at Tufts. And one of the things that stands out to me in your writing and your talking is the way that you frame curiosity and questioning as one of the things of what it means to be human. And I was just wondering if you could speak a little bit to a particular practice or practices that you have developed for cultivating a genuine sense of wonder in everyday life.
Well, the sense of wonder in everyday life, that should be part of who we are. I don't know how you can teach it, but, I like looking out. I try to learn something new every day, and there's so much out there, or else you can learn it from reading or something like that. There's so much wonderful. We have this waterfall at Gombe where the chimps do these wild waterfall displays or dances. And I feel that they have this sense of wonder and awe when they look at the waterfall. But what was the first part of your question? I've forgotten it now. What did you first ask me?
Just that you have framed being human as a practice of being curious and questioning.
Right. Well, I tell you that being curious is shared. We share it with many, many, many animals. Animals are basically really curious. And there's some wonderful footage now out there of little robots going out among animals, and these animals being so curious. Of course, chimps immediately destroy them. Other animals, look at them. I watched one female at Gombe. She was adolescent, and there was a dead rat. I don't know why it died, but anyway, it was a dead rat. And there's this amazing footage, and she looks down at this rat, and she goes down on one elbow and gets very close to it. Then she goes down on the other elbow and gets very close to it. She's totally curious, presumably about why it's dead. But it raises questions like, do they understand death? I don't know. They understand, and it brings up a philosophical discussion because they understand what's dead and what's alive. But the concept of death is something different, isn't it? I think, if you think about it.
Thank you, John, for the question. And we've got time for one more. So, Andra, you can finish off the audience questions here.
Hi, I'm Andra, and I'm a current sophomore studying psychology at Tufts. Thank you so much for being here with us today, and thank you for letting me ask this question. I've admired your research since I was really little, so it's an absolute honor, and I'm so excited to hear from you today. So my question was, what advice do you have for the current generation of college students who are eager to enact change in environmental policy?
Well, first of all, join Roots and Shoots, because you'll be then with many, many others who want to do the same thing. And it's basically like I've said before, don't try and force change. Try and get to people's hearts somehow. So to change policy, consumers have an enormous role in changing policy, because if you don't like the way a big corporation works, then, ask these 3 questions when you go to buy the product. Did it harm animals? Did it harm the environment? Is it cheap because of unfair wages or child slave labor or something? And if the answer is yes, don't buy it. And then when it comes to food, I keep hearing, well, it would be great if we all ate organically, but it costs a bit more. I grew up in World War II, and every mouthful of food was precious. And we never wasted anything. And people today take food for granted. They buy it and they waste it. Food waste is a huge problem. So if it costs a little bit more, you will value it more. and you will waste it less, much less. And somehow we have to get a reasonable, equitable value on food. The reason we have these incredibly cruel factory farms for animals is because people want cheap meat. And so the suffering and the terrible conditions of the workers aren't taken into consideration, and the government subsidize these factory farms, and it's all wrong. So I think, to answer your question more, find out more about it, really think it through. And with your friends in Roots and Shoots, mind you, just think, how should we best tackle this? Is it stories? Can we make a little film? Young people are very often influencing their parents, their teachers, their grandparents, but you find your own way. I can't answer it for every different person. And I'm not.
Thank you.
I'm not somebody who just says, "Oh, this is what you do," because I don't always know. And wherever you are in the situation you're interested in, and the thing you want to change will have its own way forward. And other people will probably know way better than I could how you should move forward. But don't be aggressive. That's one thing I would really urge you. Don't point a finger and say, "I demand that you do this," because they're going to not want to listen to you.
Thank you, Andra, for your question.
Thank you.
And thank everyone else. I know we had a lot of other questions from the audience, and there were some that came in the Q&A that hopefully we managed to address. I want to thank you so much, Jane, for your time today. It's very appreciated. I think we would love to be able to do this all day, but we know that you have many other engagements and many other people to inspire. So we really want to thank you for taking the time to share some stories and reminisce a little bit with Felicia and I today, as well as to hopefully inspire many, many people that were able to join us. I also want to thank President Monaco, and Dean Salamat and the Tisch College for organizing this event today. And then Felicia, if you want to say a few words.
Well, no, I just wanted to add the thanks. It's been wonderful to reconnect, because you were instrumental not only in our professional development, but people on this call don't all know that Chris and I are married and have kids. And so you have in the past taken credit for that, which is due, very much due. So we have a lot to be thankful for. And just the work at Gombe is inspiring on so many different levels. The conservation work, but the tapestry of life, and also the empowerment of communities and people. And then just the activism, the engagement to help people understand their options to change their world for the better through their choices and their actions. So thank you for continuing to do that work. And we look forward, hopefully, to seeing you again in person someday for some red wine and whiskey and jokes.
It's great to reconnect. Let's not drift apart. Let's stay connected. Let's try and do some collaborative things.
Absolutely.
Shoots or something. The One Health thing, which we do as well. So
we're all, yes. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank everybody. And it's been fun.